Story 1. Graffiti and Gunshots. The night was thick with the smell of rain-soaked concrete and rusting metal, the perfect backdrop for what Lucas and I had planned. We'd been talking about tagging the abandoned train yard for weeks, and tonight was finally the night. The city was quiet, with only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional hiss of the wind through the empty streets. It was a perfect night for art. Or at least that's what I told myself as we made our way to the old tracks. Lucas was already a few steps ahead, his backpack clinking with cans of spray paint. He flashed me a grin, his excitement barely contained. "This is gonna be sick, man. No one's gonna believe we did this." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the unease that had been gnawing at me all evening. It wasn't just the idea of getting caught, it was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. But Lucas had always been the brave one, the one who pushed the limits, and I wasn't about to back out now. The train yard loomed ahead, a sprawling maze of rusted tracks and decaying train cars. The place had been abandoned for years, left to rot in the shadows of the city's progress. We slipped through a gap in the chain-link fence, our footsteps muffled by the wet gravel. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and mildew, and every sound seemed to echo off the derelict metal hulks around us. "This way," Lucas whispered, leading me toward a massive graffiti-covered train car. It was a beast of a thing, its metal sides slick with rain and years of neglect. But to us it was a canvas, just waiting for our mark. We pulled out our cans, the familiar rattle comforting in the stillness. I picked a spot near the back, where the light from the distant street lamps barely reached, and started spraying. The hiss of the paint filled the air, the colors popping against the dull, rusted surface. For a moment, I lost myself in the rhythm of it, the world narrowing down to just me, the paint, and the metal. Then I heard it, a noise, faint but unmistakable, a clatter like something metal hitting the ground. I froze, my hands stilling mid-spray. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, glancing over at Lucas. He frowned, tilting his head to listen. The night had gone eerily quiet, the wind dying down to a whisper. Then from somewhere in the darkness came the sound again, a metallic clank, followed by a soft scrape, like something being dragged across the ground. "Probably just a stray cat," Lucas muttered, though I could hear the doubt in his voice. He turned back to his work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I resumed painting, but my focus was shattered. Every creak, every rustle of wind sent a spike of fear through me. And then, without warning, something flew past my head, smashing against the side of the train car with a loud crash. I jumped back, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was that? Lucas spun around, his eyes wide. "Did you see that? Someone just threw a paint can at us." We both looked around, but the night was impenetrable, the shadows hiding whoever, or whatever, had just attacked us. My breath came in quick, shallow bursts, my senses on high alert. The silence had taken on a menacing quality, as if the darkness itself was watching us, waiting for its next move. "Let's get out of here," I muttered, the thrill of the night evaporating into pure fear. But before we could move, there was a loud bang, a gunshot. The sound echoed off the metal around us, reverberating through the night. We didn't wait to see where it had come from. We just ran. The tracks beneath our feet clanged and clattered as we sprinted toward the fence, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. I could hear footsteps behind us, heavy and relentless, but I didn't dare look back. Lucas was just ahead of me, his bag bouncing against his back as he ran. Another shot rang out, closer this time, and I ducked instinctively, my heart hammering in my chest. We reached the fence and Lucas scrambled up first, his hands slipping on the wet metal. I followed, every second stretching into an eternity. The footsteps were right behind me, and I could feel eyes on my back, cold and calculating. But we made it. We hit the ground on the other side and kept running, not stopping until we were far from the train yard, far from the gunshots and the darkness that seemed to swallow everything whole. When we finally stopped, panting and drenched from the rain, Lucas turned to me with wide eyes. "What the hell was that, man? Who shoots at graffiti artists?" I shook my head, trying to catch my breath. "I don't know, but I'm not going back there." We didn't talk much after that. We parted ways, each of us retreating to the safety of our homes. But the night stayed with me. The memory of those footsteps, the gunshots, the feeling of being hunted. It haunted my dreams, twisting them into nightmares I couldn't escape. Weeks passed, and I tried to push it out of my mind, to move on. But something kept gnawing at me. A need to understand what had happened that night. Lucas told me to forget it, to let it go, but I couldn't. So one night, when the city was quiet again and the rain had returned, I found myself heading back to the train yard. I told myself it was just to see if our tags were still there, to prove that we hadn't imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I needed closure, an answer to the questions that had been plaguing me since that night. The train yard was just as desolate as before, the tracks slick with rain and the air heavy with the scent of rust and decay. I slipped through the fence, my heart pounding in my chest as I made my way to the train car we had tagged. But when I got there, I froze. Our graffiti was gone, covered up by a fresh coat of paint. The bright colors we had sprayed were buried beneath layers of dull gray, as if we had never been there at all. I stepped closer, my hand brushing against the cold metal. That's when I noticed it, a faint smell, sharp and chemical. It took me a moment to place it, but when I did, my stomach turned. It was bleach, the strong, unmistakable scent of bleach. I followed the smell, my feet moving almost of their own accord. It led me to one of the train cars near the back of the yard, one that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The door was slightly ajar, and the smell of bleach was stronger here, almost overpowering. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to turn back, to leave this place and never return. But something compelled me forward. I pushed the door open, the metal groaning in protest, and stepped inside. The darkness swallowed me whole, but I could make out shapes in the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls. There, in the center of the car, was a chair, a simple, wooden chair, its legs bolted to the floor. Ropes hung from the armrests, frayed and stained. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. The smell of bleach was overwhelming now, burning my nostrils. I didn't want to know what had happened here, but the evidence was undeniable. This wasn't just an abandoned train car. It was something else, something far more sinister. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, I heard it. A metallic clang, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, coming from just outside the car. I didn't wait to see who or what was out there. I turned and fled, my feet slipping on the wet metal. As I sprinted back toward the fence, the footsteps followed me, echoing in the night, but I didn't dare look back. I reached the fence, my hands shaking as I scrambled over it. The rain pelted down on me, mixing with the sweat on my skin. But I didn't stop until I was back on the city streets, far from the train yard and whatever horrors it held. I never went back. Lucas asked me what happened, why I looked so shaken, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him. Some things were better left unsaid, better left buried in the darkness where they belonged. But even now, as I lie awake at night, I can still hear those footsteps, still smell the bleach, still feel the cold metal of that train car beneath my fingers. The city moves on, oblivious to the secrets it hides, but I can't forget. And I know that somewhere, out there in the night, the shadows are still watching, waiting for their next prey. I've always had a thing for trains. There's something about the rhythmic clanking of steel wheels on tracks, the rush of wind, and the sense of freedom that comes with hopping a train that calls to me. It had been years since I last felt that thrill, but today, the itch was too strong to ignore. I decided to go train hopping, just for old time's sake. The sun was high, casting long shadows over the tracks as I made my way toward the secluded stretch where I knew a freight train would slow down just enough for me to catch it. The area was isolated, surrounded by dense woods, with the tracks snaking off into the distance. There wasn't a soul in sight, which was exactly how I liked it. As I walked along the tracks, the familiar hum of anticipation settled in my chest. I knew the risks, getting caught, getting hurt, but that was part of the allure. It was a dance with danger, and I'd always been good at it. Up ahead, I spotted the tunnel. It was an old one, carved into the side of a hill, dark and foreboding even in the daylight. I'd passed through it a few times before, but there was something different about it today. Maybe it was the way the shadows seemed to cling to the entrance, or the eerie silence that hung in the air. Whatever it was, it made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. But I pushed the feeling aside. I wasn't here to be spooked by an old tunnel. I was here to catch a train. As I approached the tunnel, I heard it, the distant rumble of a freight train. My heart quickened, and I picked up my pace, my eyes scanning the tracks for the perfect spot to make my move. The train came into view, its massive engine roaring as it approached. I waited for the right moment, then sprinted alongside it, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of the ladder. I hauled myself up, my muscles straining as I pulled myself onto the train car. The wind whipped past me, carrying with it the familiar scent of diesel and rust. I settled in, leaning back against the car and letting the rhythm of the tracks lull me into a sense of calm. But that calm didn't last long. Just as the train entered the tunnel, I saw it. A flash of light, quick and bright, like a camera flash. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving me blinking in confusion. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just my eyes playing tricks on me in the darkness of the tunnel. But then I felt it. A cold, clammy hand wrapping around my leg. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The hand tightened its grip, fingers digging into my flesh with a strength that seemed impossible. Panic surged through me, and I kicked out, desperate to free myself. The train was picking up speed, the walls of the tunnel blurring as we hurtled forward. I clawed my way up the ladder, my hands slipping on the metal as I tried to escape whatever was down there. The hand released me suddenly, and I scrambled up onto the top of the car, gasping for breath. For a moment, I just lay there, the wind tearing at my clothes, as I tried to process what had just happened. My leg throbbed where the hand had grabbed me, and I could still feel the icy grip of those fingers on my skin. But there was no time to dwell on it. The train was speeding out of the tunnel, and I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't go back through the tunnel to get to my car, not after what had just happened, but that meant I had to find another way out of this mess. I jumped down from the train as it slowed down on the other side of the tunnel, my legs shaky as I hit the ground. The tracks stretched out in front of me, disappearing into the distance. But the tunnel loomed behind me, dark and ominous. I started walking, trying to put as much distance between myself and that tunnel as possible. But then I heard it, a faint clicking sound, like nails tapping against metal. It was coming from the tunnel, getting louder with each passing second. I stopped, my heart racing. I had nothing on me, no weapon, no way to defend myself. But I knew I couldn't just run. Whatever was in that tunnel, it was fast, and it was coming for me. Desperation makes you do crazy things. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through my sound effects app. I found what I was looking for, a gunshot sound. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I turned to face the tunnel, holding my phone out in front of me like a weapon. The clicking was closer now, echoing through the tunnel like a death knell. My finger hovered over the play button, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I saw them, two figures emerging from the darkness. They were tall, their bodies shrouded in shadow, but their eyes gleamed with a malevolent light that sent a chill down my spine. I didn't wait. I hit the play button, the sound of a gunshot ringing out through the tunnel. The figures hesitated, their movements jerky and unnatural, and I took my chance. I ran. I sprinted down the tracks, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I pushed myself to go faster. Behind me, I heard a screech, a sound so inhuman, so filled with rage and hunger, that it spurred me on even more. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just kept running, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. The tracks blurred beneath my feet, the world narrowing down to just the sound of my pounding footsteps, and the blood rushing in my ears. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw it. A break in the trees, a road up ahead. I veered off the tracks, crashing through the underbrush until I hit pavement. I didn't stop running until I was far from the tracks, far from the tunnel, far from whatever had been chasing me. When I finally collapsed, gasping for breath on the side of the road, I couldn't believe I had made it out. My hands were shaking, my mind reeling from the terror of what had just happened. But I was alive. I had escaped. I don't know what those things were or what they wanted. I don't know why I went back to train hopping in the first place. But one thing is for sure. I'll never go near that tunnel again. Some places are better left alone. Their secrets buried in the darkness where they belong. And as I made my way back to civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were still watching me, still waiting for their chance to drag me back into the darkness.